In the early 1970s, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology conducted a groundbreaking study known as limits to growth. Using complex computer models, MIT researchers explored how unchecked population growth, resource depletion, and environmental stress could impact humanity's future. They projected that, without major interventions, the world could face serious crises by the mid-21st century.
The study showed that continued economic and population growth would lead to resource exhaustion, pollution, and potentially catastrophic declines in living standards. This prediction, while hypothetical, suggested that if humanity didn't curb its consumption patterns, we could reach a tipping point where natural systems can no longer sustain societal demands, resulting in economic collapse and significant social consequences. I'll examine the primary factors from MIT's limits to growth model: population growth, resource depletion, and environmental impact. By comparing the original projections to current data, I'll assess whether MIT's predictions hold true in 2024.
We'll dive into each key factor, using today's numbers to see if MIT's warnings about sustainability, consumption, and ecological health are unfolding as anticipated. Through this analysis, I hope to determine whether the MIT predictions are proving accurate and what lessons we can draw for the future. Let's begin by analyzing each factor.
Key factor number 1 is population growth. In the Limits to Growth study, population growth was identified as one of the critical factors leading to societal collapse if growth patterns remained unchanged. At that time, the global population was approximately 3.8 billion. The model projected that if the world continued on a business-as-usual path, the population could exceed 10 billion by the mid-21st century. This growth was predicted based on historical data and the assumption that the current trends in birth rates and life expectancy would continue. As of 2024, the global population is estimated to be around 8 billion according to the United Nations. This figure shows substantial growth since MIT's predictions were made, although it is less than the projected 10 billion. The growth rate has also slowed compared to the earlier decades. The UN projects that the world population could reach around 9.7 billion by 2050 and approximately 10.4 billion by 2100, indicating that while growth is continuing, it is at a declining rate. So, while MIT's report correctly anticipated resource strain as a significant risk, the population growth component has evolved differently. Advances in agricultural productivity, technology, and changes in family size preferences have helped mitigate some of the resource pressure that the MIT study foresaw. However, the world still faces sustainability challenges related to resource consumption, waste, and environmental degradation, highlighting the continued relevance of the study's broader concerns. In essence, MIT's predictions partially hold, but shifting demographics and technology have so far allowed humanity to avoid the most extreme outcomes they modeled. Key factor number 2 is resource depletion. Resource depletion was a central theme in MIT's Limits to Growth study. The research predicted that if current consumption patterns continued, the planet would face significant shortages of essential resources like fossil fuels, minerals, and fresh water. It forecasted that global oil production could peak around the early 21st century, leading to severe economic consequences. For instance, the model suggested that without a shift to renewable energy, oil reserves might be exhausted by the end of the century, forcing societies to confront substantial economic and infrastructural challenges. Fast forward to 2024, and the situation reflects some of the dire predictions made by MIT. The global oil demand has indeed peaked in some regions, although it remains high overall. According to the International Energy Agency, global oil consumption was approximately 101 million barrels per day in 2023, with projections suggesting it could remain stable or even decrease as alternative energy sources gain traction. Despite this, the depletion of easy-to-access oil reserves has led to increased extraction from more challenging sources, like tar sands and deep-water drilling, which have higher environmental costs and are less sustainable. In terms of mineral resources, the World Bank has warned about the critical shortages of key metals, such as lithium and cobalt, essential for renewable energy technologies and electric vehicle batteries. The demand for these resources is projected to increase by over 400% by 2040, driven by the global shift towards electrification and sustainable energy. This surge in demand raises concerns about whether the current mining practices can keep up, especially given that extraction processes can take years and environmental degradation is a significant issue. Water scarcity is another pressing concern that echoes the predictions of MIT. The United Nations estimates that by 2025, nearly 1.8 billion people will be living in areas with absolute water scarcity, and 2/3 of the world's population could be under water-stressed conditions. This alarming trend aligns with MIT's prediction of increased pressure on freshwater resources due to population growth and industrial demands. Assessing whether MIT's predictions about resource depletion are accurate involves looking at current trends. The increasing difficulty of accessing oil and mineral resources, coupled with the challenges of managing water scarcity, suggests that MIT's concerns about resource depletion were well-founded. While technological advancements have provided some alternatives, such as renewable energy sources, the fundamental issues of overconsumption and unsustainable practices persist. The transition to a more sustainable model will require significant policy changes and a shift in global consumption habits to avoid the worst-case scenarios outlined in the original study. Now let's talk about key factor number 3, industrial growth and pollution. The original MIT Limits to Growth study posited that industrial production would continue to expand at an exponential rate, leading to a significant increase in pollution levels. This rise in industrial output would not only degrade environmental quality, but also threaten human health and ecological stability. The model suggested that if industrial growth continued unchecked, pollution would rise to critical levels by the mid-21st century, leading to detrimental effects on public health and quality of life. In the original projections, MIT forecasted that industrial output could increase by 200 to 300% from 1970 levels by 2040, leading to pollution levels that could reach critical thresholds. For instance, the study noted that global carbon dioxide emissions could rise significantly, contributing to climate change and environmental degradation. Comparing this to today, the World Bank reported that global carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustion reached approximately 36.4 billion metric tons in 2022. This figure reflects a continuous increase from earlier years, with emissions rising about 60% since 1990. Additionally, global industrial production has seen exponential growth. For instance, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization reported that global manufacturing value added grew from 5.7 trillion in 1990 to over 17 trillion in 2021. This growth correlates with increasing levels of pollution, including higher particulate matter and other harmful emissions. Moreover, pollution statistics support MIT's concerns. The World Health Organization estimates that air pollution contributes to approximately 7 million premature deaths annually. This statistic underscores the severe public health impact of industrial pollution, which aligns with MIT's predictions about health risks linked to environmental degradation. The assessment indicates that MIT's research appears to be largely accurate when we consider current data on industrial growth and pollution levels. The continuing rise in both industrial output and pollution suggests that the trajectory envisioned by MIT is playing out in reality. As industrial activities expand, the accompanying environmental degradation and health crises manifest increasingly, aligning with MIT's warnings of a critical environmental tipping point if unsustainable practices persist. Addressing these issues through sustainable industrial practices and pollution control measures is essential to avert the dire consequences projected by MIT. Key factor number 4 from MIT's Limits to Growth study centers on food production. predicting that agricultural output would struggle to keep up with the rapidly growing population, potentially leading to significant food shortages. In the early 1970s, the study projected that food production might peak around the 2020s to 2040s, facing limitations due to soil degradation, water scarcity, and environmental stressors. This anticipated decline in food availability would arise as the global population was expected to exceed 10 billion, increasing demand for food and putting immense pressure on agricultural systems. Today, the situation reflects some of the concerns raised by the MIT study, though there are also notable advancements in agricultural practices and technology. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, global food production has indeed increased significantly since the 1970s, largely due to advancements in technology, crop genetics, and farming methods. For instance, global cereal production reached approximately 2.8 billion tons in 2022, nearly doubling from about 1.5 billion tons in 1970. This increase, however, comes with challenges. Despite these advances, several issues highlight the vulnerabilities of current food systems. The United Nations estimates that nearly 828 million people were undernourished in 2021, a stark reminder of inequities in food distribution. Furthermore, climate change is impacting agriculture by increasing the frequency of extreme weather events, which disrupts food production. The FAO's reports indicate that up to 30% of global crop yields could be lost by 2050 if current trends in climate change continue. In terms of resource use, agriculture remains one of the largest consumers of fresh water, accounting for approximately 70% of global freshwater withdrawals. As populations grow, the competition for water resources intensifies, which aligns with MIT's concerns about the sustainability of food production systems. Soil health is another pressing issue. The World Bank has warned that around 30% of the world's arable land is degraded, further threatening food security. Evaluating whether MIT's research was accurate involves looking at both the quantitative data and the qualitative aspects of food production. While global food production has indeed increased, the projections of MIT regarding the strain on resources and the risk of food shortages resonate with current challenges. The advancements in agricultural technology have so far mitigated some potential declines in production. However, the growing population and environmental pressures suggest that the threats outlined in the MIT study remain pertinent. At last, let's talk about key factor number 5, economic stability and living standards. MIT's 1972 Limits to Growth study warned that unchecked industrial growth and resource depletion would lead to a decline in economic stability and living standards. The model projected that by the mid-21st century, as resources became scarcer and pollution levels rose, per capita income would stagnate or decline significantly. Specifically, the model suggested that average global income could drop to around 50% of its 1970 levels by 2040, if growth patterns continued unchecked. Comparing this prediction to today's data reveals a complex picture. As of 2024, the global economy has shown resilience, recovering from crises such as the 2008 financial collapse and the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the World Bank, global GDP was approximately $103 trillion in 2022, reflecting a consistent upward trajectory since the early 1970s. However, this growth has not been evenly distributed. In fact, income inequality has worsened significantly. The wealthiest 10% of the global population now holds over 76% of total wealth, while the bottom 50% possess just 2%. This stark inequality suggests that while the overall economy may be growing, many individuals are not experiencing an improvement in their living standards. Moreover, the inflation rate has surged in many parts of the world, exacerbated by the aftermath of the pandemic and geopolitical tensions. In the US, for example, inflation hit a peak of around 9% in 2022, significantly impacting purchasing power and living standards. The decline in real wages in some sectors and increasing costs of living, especially for housing and essential goods, have made it difficult for many to maintain a decent standard of living. When assessing whether MIT's research holds true, the data indicates a mixed outcome. The model's prediction of a decline in per capita income aligns with the experiences of many in low-income brackets who struggle against rising costs and stagnant wages. Conversely, the overall growth in global GDP suggests that while the economy may not have collapsed as predicted, the quality of life for large segments of the population has not improved equitably. The combination of rising wealth concentration, persistent poverty, and increasing costs suggests that the foundation for economic stability is fragile, supporting MIT's cautionary outlook.
The cautionary messages from MIT serve as a reminder that without proactive measures towards sustainability and equity, we risk exacerbating the very issues they foresaw. As we look to the future, it is crucial to prioritize innovative solutions that can lead to a more balanced and resilient society. Understanding the implications of past research can empower us to make informed decisions that promote not only economic stability, but also a fair quality of life for all. Thank you for joining this discussion. Let's continue to engage with these vital issues, advocating for sustainable practices that can shape a better tomorrow. For further insights and data, I encourage you to explore additional resources on economic trends and sustainability efforts.